When Frank Miller's friend, Marcus, passed away, he could hardly have suspected that he would soon be in contact with him once again. They had met at university. Both were studying to become notaries, a path that Frank successfully completed. Marcus, however, became a writer of thrillers and was, to be honest, quite an odd character. He had a fascination with occult matters, was interested in anything related to the supernatural, and wrote several bestsellers about it. He had often pestered Frankie Boy, as his friend called him, with semi-scientific research on the afterlife, the spirit world, and Frank had always listened patiently, because that's what friends do. When it became clear that Marcus's cancer was untreatable, he asked Frank for a favor. Frank agreed. What else could he do? But the request was, to put it mildly, strange. And now, with Marcus having passed away last week at the age of 52, sitting across from Frank in his office was Jessica Van Zanten, Marcus's niece. She appeared no older than 25 and had none of the kind, soft gaze that had so defined Marcus. She seemed tired, chewing gum in a way that reminded Frank of a cow. He immediately disliked her. "I must tell you that I've been dreading this conversation, Miss Van Zanten. Your uncle was a dear friend of mine, and to discuss his will with you is, to be honest, difficult." Jessica's face didn't flinch, as if she were wearing a mask. She sighed. "Let's get to the point. Why am I here? I can't imagine my underachieving uncle left me anything." "Why?" Frank asked. She didn't beat around the bush. "Because I thought he was a terrible man, a creep with his superstitions and stories about ghosts and goblins. And I made it clear to him. I hated him." She spoke the word hated as if she were burning her fingers on something. "Aha," Frank said, and a silence fell. "Then I have a surprise for you today." He pulled the cloth off of a tray that had been sitting on the desk the entire time and leaned back. What is this?" Frank nodded. "I understand you have questions. I must also admit that in my long career, I have never seen such a will, but it is Marcus's final wish." "What is this?" she repeated. "These are 2 small custom-made puppets with your likeness and that of your uncle." The puppets, no larger than a puppet theater doll, and indeed bearing a creepy resemblance to Jessica and Marcus, stared with their dead bead eyes at the ceiling. "Is this what he leaves me?" Without waiting for an answer, she stood up and made as if to leave the office. $2.7 million. Jessica stopped. Then she turned around. The disgust in her eyes was replaced by unashamed interest. "You will inherit $2.7 million if you do what I instruct you. If you follow the conditions in Marcus Van Zanten's will." She sat down again, squinting her eyes into slits, and for a moment, she looked like a weasel. A money-hungry weasel. "What do I have to do?" "The only thing you have to do is donate 5 parts of your body, which you must then willingly insert into the puppet." She frowned. "That puppet, I assume?" She pointed to the puppet with the lipstick and dark hair. "No," Frank said. "The other one." "What?" she said. "What is this? Some ridiculous voodoo?" "Your uncle made it clear that if you refuse to comply with the conditions, his entire fortune will be donated to the local library." He saw Jessica grit her teeth. Then she said, "What parts?" "First, a lock of hair, the length of your hand." He opened a drawer, pulled out a small box, and opened the lid. He took out a pair of scissors. "You've got to be kidding me." "The second thing required is your saliva. A tablespoon, please. The third item is 2 fingernails from both of your index fingers." He watched as Jessica shook her head, placing a hand over her eyes, but she didn't interrupt him. "The fourth part, your skin." "My skin? How do you expect me to—" Frank took out 3 small but sharp knives from the box. Pick one, please. A few flakes of skin will suffice. Lastly, your blood. Again, a tablespoon. You may use the knife. He saw her start to smile, a grin that split her face in two, making her look ugly, and for a moment, he could imagine how much Marcus must have hated her. The silence that followed was long and awkward. Finally, Jessica said, "Fine, it's disgusting and absurd, but I'll do it. I have a right to that money." She took the scissors and cut off a lock of her hair. Then she spat into the spoon and clipped her nails, bright red, and laid them next to the puppet. Finally, she took a deep breath and sliced off the tip of her thumb with the knife. It started bleeding immediately. Frank handed her a bandage. "Skin and blood," she said. "Is that enough?" "Without a doubt," Frank said and slid the puppet towards her. "If you would be so kind." Jessica noticed that the back of the puppet had an opening. She shoved the hair inside, then the nails and her thumb. The blood and her saliva colored the puppet pink. "There you go, Uncle Marcus," she said as though he were alive in the room. Her smile was now a grin. "I've completed your bizarre little task. Where do I sign?" "Excellent, Miss Van Zenten," Frank Miller said. "One moment, I'll put these puppets aside and fetch the necessary documents." He took the tray with the puppets and stood up. "Wait," said Jessica. "Wait a minute, what's in the other one? The one that looks like me?" Now it was Frank's turn to grin. He left the room, walked down a hall to a small room with nothing but a thick book on a desk and a few candles. He locked the door, lit the candles, and opened the book. Then he placed his hands on the puppets and prayed with all his heart that he was saying the words correctly, that he could fulfill the final part of Marcus's request and speak the incantation his friend had often mentioned when he was still healthy and writing his books. When Frank returned half an hour later, his cheeks were bright red. He was breathing unevenly and had sweat stains under his arms. When he sat back at his desk, his breath caught. Jessica Van Zenten was still sitting in front of him, but there was something strange about her. Her eyes looked different, softer, kinder. She pointed to the pen in his breast pocket. "Shall I sign then?" Frank hesitated. Then he handed her the pen and pointed to the document that read signature. Jessica Van Zenten smiled a warm, attractive smile. "Would you fetch her driver's license from her bag, Frankie boy? I have no idea what her signature looks like."